Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. In this session, we take a look at essay writing. So we've just covered all sorts of very complex maths and science-based questions with Peter Taylor when we were looking at assessment and the importance of reading your learning outcomes and your student notes. And before that, we took a look at process and content words and critical thinking. So now we should have all the skills to start looking at our assessments, and hopefully you'll also have located your first tutor marked assignment on the assessment tab of your module website. Lee and Zach are feeding in your questions and chat, and I understand there's been a lot of chat and discussion and sharing going on, so please do keep that up. You'll notice that we've got some new things for you to vote on. So we'd like to know, have you written an essay before, yes or no? Last time you wrote academically, very recently, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, ages and ages and ages ago, and the three words you associate with essay writing. If you can only think of one or two, that is fine, but you just need to put a full stop in the other boxes, otherwise your results won't submit. We'd also like to know whether you're coming to our essay writing workshops, just so that we can order biscuits in. Yes, no, or unsure. So let us know what you think about that. Isabella, you've been at the Student Hub Live before and went down very well with students, which is why we've asked you back to tell us all about essay writing. Now, you have done a lot of degrees, etc., and you also do a lot of writing. So you should be an expert at this whole idea of essay writing. And of course, you teach for the Open University on a science module with me. So yes. Yeah. So tell us about essay writing, because again, we approach this very, very differently depending on the discipline, and I wouldn't want students to think that this is an entirely social science and arts-based discussion, because much as I would love that, we do write essays elsewhere, but those can be structurally and fundamentally quite different tasks. So again, it's important to read the process words and the content words, but on the idea that essays are like a large bit of continuous prose, what are the key things you think we need to know?
The key thing is, what is the essay asking you? So the same as Peter was saying, what's your TM asking you? What is the actual essay question? You will probably get a title, and then you'll get some what we call question rubric, so a bit of explanation where it might say, using your studies in book 1 or using your studies in weeks 2 to 3, write about this. So that's the really big clue, because it's telling you what you need to actually look at to find the information. Now, there's a couple of different ways of approaching essays, and what I tend to say to people who are really struggling is to start off with looking at the essay title, what might you need to know? So what clues are there then? What would you have to go and find out? Is there a word that's going to need defining? Is there something there that actually is assumed knowledge? Or are you going to have to start off by saying, I'm starting off by explaining whatever? You won't necessarily say I. This is something where actually you will find there's a bit of a difference between modules. I teach on science modules and social sciences, but if you're doing an arts module, you might have what we call personal pronouns, where you would say, I think this and I do this, whereas in others, all of my modules, we don't have that. No, we don't have I. And I'm always saying to students, no, don't say I. It's not that we don't want to know what you think, but it's a way of phrasing it. So again, that's another thing. Look at the guidance, see what it tells you, because obviously we're looking at all students here, so we're not just looking at science, we're not looking at social sciences. Hopefully, we've got some postgraduate students here, and again, they've done a first degree, but how on earth do you start approaching your first essay on a new module? Yeah. That's what we want to try and help here.
Well, we've asked our audience at home whether they've written an essay before. 19% said no, they haven't. So, a fifth of people have not written an essay. And also 35% said they've written it last time academically ages and ages and ages ago. So it might be people approaching their level 1 module from school a long time ago. And whilst some of these questions that actually they were quite difficult that Peter gave us, but some things that sort of require a very short answer can seem a lot easier. But essay writing can provoke some anxiety for people who may not have approached it for a long time. But it is a learned thing, isn't it?
It is. It's very much learned. And I know I'm talking from the perspective of I've been writing essays for quite a long time now. And the interesting thing is that when I first went off to study a science module, I actually had this survey given to me in my first Christmas, and, how do you feel that you've been disadvantaged because you had an English A-level? And I said, I haven't, because I know how to write essays. And the tricky thing there is do you know how? My thing is, it's a story. An essay is a story. Yes, you can look at it. It's this great, big, long piece of text. Yes, it is, but it's not one single piece of text. It's an introduction, a conclusion, and then a series of paragraphs. Look at each paragraph, break it down and go, oh, OK, today I'm going to look at this little paragraph. That makes it so much easier rather than going, I'm just going to look at this massive, great, big thing, which is where you will panic. And which is where I'll panic when I look at that. I go, I don't know. So break it down, look for the process words, look for the different things, and then go, how can I tell a story to answer this question, which is actually one of my things, isn't it? Make it into a question. If I was saying to you, Karen, how do you write an essay? Actually, no, that's already a question. That's a bit daft, isn't it? Write an essay. How do you write an essay? Make it into a question. Is there any way where you can actually rephrase it so that you can answer it and say, if I'm going to write an essay about plants, what are plants? What do plants look like? Boxing gloves, what is a boxing glove? That kind of thing, and think, what kind of things can I define in there? Obviously, it's going to depend on the level, because if you're writing a postgraduate one, then hopefully there's going to be a lot more assumed knowledge. But when you're going in at level 1, look at what they're asking you to say. Do they say you might need to start off by defining whatever? Do they say, in your introduction, you need to make it clear? One of my modules, mental health, the one that we teach on, we often talk about the biopsychosocial model.
All the time.
Which we do all the time. And I actually managed to say it correctly this time. It's one of the ones I always stumble over. But you always have to say, what is it? You actually have to define what you're talking about. And that's actually quite important for a lot of essays, because I find students who struggle name drop and drop in these words and they go, oh, I've seen them in the module materials. They're right, I'll put them in. But the way they're using them, it doesn't actually sound like they know what they mean. And it's important, when I'm marking, I want you to convince me that you know what you're talking about. And that I come at the end going, knows what you're talking about, therefore I can use that marking criteria that Peter was talking about, say, got this, got that, actually didn't quite give me enough about that, so that's the kind of feedback I would give.
Now, bearing in mind that we, if we could sort of take it as a given, that we don't want students to sit down and write a 1,000-word essay and go, I've written 250 words, so I'm a quarter of the way through. We want people to plan their essays, and we'll talk about that. So the idea is that, you know, a lot of this time in terms of writing an essay is not actually doing any of the writing. The writing is a really, really small bit that sort of joins all the thoughts together into a format. So how do people approach an essay and decide again what parameters, I guess, of discussion they want to include?
This is your essay plan, and there's a couple of different, well, there's not a couple, there's lots of different ways of planning. So you can have a list, you can have this sort of thing, pick out the words, pick out the definitions. So a plan is basically your map or your recipe. When you're making a cake, you just don't go, I'm going to make a cake. You need to know what goes into it, and you need to know how to put them together. Think of it in that kind of way. So your essay, what's going to go into your essay? What different parts do you need, and how are you going to put them together? So your plan could be a list of keywords that you're going to define. It could be pages if you've got books, or it could be topics if you've got different things, or the different websites, or anything like that. I've actually got, I asked... now,
is that a plan or is that a mind map?
This is a mind map. Because that sounds to me like a mind map. Well, there's lots of different ways. This is an amazing mind map that... one of my friend's daughters has recently done for A-level history. This is not necessarily one that I would say you need to go straight into, because it's very complex. But what's interesting there is she's got different things. So she's got different topics and then definitions of them. This is one way of doing it that you could do. And then you can write lots of different bits about it and say, this is what I'm then going to approach. This is a very detailed one, though, and I wouldn't necessarily expect our level 1 students to be going straight to that. No. So my map has little things and little bits out of it. You could just have a list. Often I go on a list, or you could just have basically scribbling lots of different things that could be relevant. There are different ways, and if you go on to From Student Home in the study skills section, there is a bit about planning, and there's a couple of different examples that other students have used, and you could go, I like that idea. I'm not very good at mind maps. It's not the way I work, but I've seen some wonderful ones that other students have done. So it's a case of seeing what works for you. But the key bit is picking the bits out of what you're being asked to do and what do you then need to do. How are you going to get them into your essay?
Yeah. Absolutely. So we've looked at the process words, we've looked at the guidance, we have an idea about what we want to do. We then start selecting material. Now, you mentioned before that there were these sort of conventional structures, paragraphs and introduction and conclusion. And whilst they can be different in terms of the content, there is a sort of way that's doing them that is better than others. And you mentioned defining things and setting parameters. And so if we were talking about plants, we might say, actually, I'm going to approach this essay and talk about you know, some biology and the uses of plants at the Student Hub Live. And that's my parameters. Whilst plants can be used in blah, blah, and blah, 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 I'm really going to just cover this specific area. So how do we shape our introduction so that we tell the reader what we're going to cover and set our parameters and include all those definitions that we need to demonstrate our understanding of the subject matter?
Well, the introduction is that. It's the bit that is going to say, this is how I'm going to do it. Again, whether it's saying what I'm going to do or this is how it's going to be done. check your module guidance, because there are some that actually like you to have some word definitions and say this word, this word, this word, and actually have a list of definitions. I've seen that in some. Not all do that. Some just want a piece of prose, which is about 10 to 15% of the overall word count. We'll make it clear what you're going to cover. It's not just rewording the question, which is what a lot of people do. So if it says we're going to write about plants that Student Hub Lives, plants that Student Hub Lives are, well, yeah, but what? You've actually got to add a little bit to it and make it clear, whet the appetite of the reader that says this is what's going to happen.
So should you say something really profound then, like, plants are amazing. Without them, we would have no life. They provide oxygen and are the only source of survival for the planet.
Depends on your module. I get these amazingly profound things in some of my science modules, and I have to say, that's lovely, but this is a science module, and we write academically. So most often, I would say, in most of the modules, there's a particular academic style, and it's quite formal. So when I'm talking, I talk in a different way depending what I'm doing. So think about the voice, think about your audience. If you're going to explain to a child, a 5-year-old, you would explain in a different way to the way you would explain to another adult. Or if you were trying to explain in a job interview, think of the different ways. Sometimes you will be asked in an essay, write as if to a friend. Sometimes if it doesn't say that, you are basically writing as if you're writing to somebody else doing your module. So I have a reasonable level of understanding, but you need to make it clear any words that you're using, what they mean, and how they're relevant to the overall topic, so that you're making it clear to begin with what's going to come and what's important. Not a list of what's going to come, but a sort of a bit more of a prose way.
Because I think we often think of this funnel thing, and maybe people who haven't written for a long time, I know, when I was first taught to write essays, we had this funnel at the beginning and then the middle and then the funnel at the end. And it's sort of how big that funnel is and how upreaching it can be. And so what you're saying is really it's about sort of carving out the word count and saying, right, about 10 to 15% is about right. Therefore, if I need to do X, Y and Z, have I got room for any other stuff?
Yes.
Probably not.
One thing actually I could went with is you don't have to write the introduction at the start.
No.
You can actually come back later and write it, not then doing it in a forward tense as opposed to the back tense from, I've just used completely the wrong word. I can't even think what my names are.
What the what, sorry?
The forward, I said forward tense and back tense. That's not very grammatically correct.
Past
and future tense.
Yes.
So some people write the introduction is the future tense and then the conclusion is exactly the same in the past tense. That's not very good.
No.
But it's about sometimes actually getting that bulk of the essay, the different paragraphs covering the different things, because you might be asked to explain 3 things about using plants in Student Hub Live. If it says that, 3 paragraphs. 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3. And that's actually quite simple. And often you'll probably find in early, particularly level 1 modules, they will give you a lot of guidance and they might say, write 4 paragraphs. If they tell you to write 4 paragraphs, honestly, write 4 paragraphs. Don't write 7 paragraphs, because you need to follow the instructions. It's about that as well.
Okay. Well, we asked people at home what 3 things they associated with essay writing, and I'd like to take a look at that in just a minute. But apparently people have been asking about the dates of the workshops, which I have written down here. Isabella and I will be doing these. They're in online rooms, so they're not like on the TV like now. They're going to be in a room. They're for any student at any level, and they're on the 17th of October at 8:30 at night, 24th of October again at 8:30, and the 8th of November at 8 o'clock. And we're going to section those into 3 areas. So we're going to look at unpacking the question and considering the material, drafting and structuring, and then writing, editing and referencing. So the idea with these is that you can bring your assignment along, we'll do a little bit of teaching, and then you can have some time working with other students, sort of saying, actually, this is what I think this means. And somebody else might say, well, have you thought of it from this side? So it's really giving you the space to think about how you can work on your assignments as you're going through them. So I hope you can join us for that, and people have been filling in those widgets. Anyway, let's see what people had to say about 3 things they associate with essay writing. Confusion. Okay, good planning is right in the middle there, as it should be. Title, introduction, Surf Teddy. Oh yes, Surf Teddy.
Surf Teddy is amazing.
Anxious beforehand, eager competence. Oh gosh, there's so many cool words here. Hard work, main body, long. So a lot of people talking about processes of writing the essay, things that go in the essay, and some of them talking about feelings like boring, stressful, worried, etc. So perhaps that's from some people who maybe haven't written an essay for quite a while. Essays, though, are a real chance to sort of show off your understanding of things. And even though they can be daunting, it gives you the chance to say, hey, this is what I know about X, Y, and Z that I've been studying. And some are easier than others. But let's return to this idea of planning. And you said maybe not write the introduction at the beginning, but have these paragraphs. And you mentioned that these might have big points in them. Now, some students will see these things like they'll get used to this idea of PEE, the point evidence and example, or they're various sort of things that we sort of encourage students to do. But actually, a well-structured paragraph is a delight because it says something and it sort of says, well, this is why I'm saying it and this is how it relates to the question.
Absolutely.
So if we were starting with some of our paragraphs and we understand the question, what might those paragraphs look like and what could people bear in mind to make the most of their strengths and their critical thinking as they've been reading the material?
Well, taking it from completely basic, obviously, we're looking for grammatically correct, so well-structured. A paragraph is not a single sentence. So there's lots of guidance about those basics. I'm not going to cover them now. But it's about a paragraph is essentially its own mini essay because it's showing you something and it's relating directly back to the main title. So if your main title is Our Plants in Student Hub Live, it's got to be clear how that particular paragraph is related to Plants in Student Hub Live. You can't go off on a tangent and go, well, actually, I'm talking about the plants in Kew Gardens. No, because that's not here. It'd be lovely if we did, if it did from Kew Gardens, but we don't. And what often we find with students who are struggling is they go, I've come across this and I think it's interesting, therefore I'm going to put it in.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that we need to caution against quite a bit, is because it's always being ruthless and looking back to the question and looking and going, what part of this paragraph is related to our overall topic? Make sure it is related to the overall topic and say how it does. So if you're using some kind of terminology, why is that terminology relevant? Have you made it clear that you understand that terminology?
Yeah.
Not going really, really basic for the 5-year-old explanation, but are you using the terminology in an appropriate way?
Yeah.
And is it clear from that how it relates? Some people like sort of leader sentences at the end of each paragraph, which will then lead on to the next bit. Again, check your model guidance because sometimes that is something that's recommended. Often, if you're postgraduate, it probably isn't, but some of the undergraduate ones, you will describe something, this is my point, this is how I describe it, and then it relates to the topic and relates on to the next bit like that, obviously. My hands are the great way to demonstrate these
the link
bits.
sentences
The link
like that, a bit like that.
sentences are great, yeah, I find it so much easier to explain with my hands. So it's about that. So sometimes people say, well, it's very difficult to give a number of sentences per paragraph, but you shouldn't have a paragraph more than sort of 150 to 200 words because that suggests you're covering more than one point.
Yes.
And you don't want the person to be going, oh, I'm nice and focused. Oh, I'm going to go and talk about this. And I'm going to go on something else. No, don't go on a tangent. Have a point. If it's a different point, if we're talking about something else about Our Plants on Student Hub Live, actually that needs to be in its own second paragraph.
Yeah.
So it's about thinking about that. But again, if you're asked to do 4 paragraphs that's asking you 4 things, make sure you've got those 4 things and they're different.
Yeah.
That you're not covering more than one in one paragraph.
Yeah.
But that you're not covering the same one in multiple, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, Peter was telling us about the importance of writing to the guidance, and he also mentioned that associate lecturers mark to certain guidance. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about this relationship between things that can be obvious and that can be made evident. Because sometimes we'll read something and think, oh, you've sort of made that link, but you haven't made it clear that you understand that there's a link. It could just be a fluke that those 2 things are in that paragraph.
Absolutely.
And you haven't sort of drawn it back to why that is so relevant to the specific question. So how could students, without being too, overt about it, how could they demonstrate to their marker that actually they've raised this point, they've raised this evidence, and this is why it's important in relation to this specific question? It's a really difficult sort of thing to get your head around sometimes.
It can be, yeah. And sometimes even trying to explain how you do it is quite tricky because you do. But if you think about it, if you read it out, try reading it out to somebody. Does it make sense? They don't have to know about the subject, but if you read it out and said that, are they left going, I'm not sure what you meant by that?
Yeah.
Or are they going, oh, okay, yeah, that makes complete sense. Yes, I understand that one.
Yeah.
I actually say, particularly when you're new to essays, if you can have somebody you can read it out to, it really helps. And if you haven't got a real person, have your study buddy, have your cat,
yes.
because actually the physical sounding it out, when I read that out, that's not what I thought it said. Because remember, what's in here is not the same as what goes down on the paper or on the screen. Honestly, and that's one of the things that I often have students go, but I knew that.
Yeah.
I know.
Yes.
And you've just told me you know that, but it's not what you wrote.
Yeah.
So you really need to make sure what you've written is fully explaining everything and it's clear on paper.
Yeah.
Well, I say on
'Cause
paper.
that can be some of the confusion, can't it? When you get your feedback and you're like, yeah, but I did that, I so did that. And you think, you may have thought that you were doing it, but it needs to be made evident and clear.
It does, yeah. And it's one of those things. Evidence is what about it is important.
Yeah.
Have you explained what it is? Have you explained, do you need to explain the how and the why?
Yeah.
That covers it too.
Right, let's take a quick trip to see what Zach and Lee are talking about.
Well, we're talking about lots on the help desk, lots and lots of interaction from students who are really keen to find out more about sort of writing their essays and coming to those assignments, and looking at mind maps, and some people have sort of highlighted mind mapping software as well for their computers as well. So there's lots going on out there, lots of chat about sort of assessments as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there's lots of great ideas coming from all the different students about techniques that they use, loving the mind maps as always, and a lot of students really looking forward to the essay writing workshops as well, and a lot of people finding this really useful because, as you say, some people haven't written an essay in years. At some point, someone said decades. I think that was Ron in the chat there. So yeah, really useful. We're getting some good feedback.
And it's a work in progress, isn't it? Because nobody's expecting people to rock up on their first day at level 1 and say, here's my essay, and it's onwards and upwards from here.
Yeah, and that's one of the main things. I mean, one of the level 1 modules I teach on, we start off by saying, have a go at doing a plan. This is what we want you to do. Write a plan about how you would do that. And then we give feedback as lecturers. We give feedback on that plan and say, well, that was really good because you'd obviously covered that. Well, actually, it wasn't clear how you were going to cover that. And then you can go, right, OK, so I can work on my planning, and then I can try and get it into an essay. So then a bit further on in the module, we get them to write an essay on the plan and then think about it. Was actually, when I actually came to write it, did the plan work? What was it about the plan that worked? Because, it's not about being perfect. We don't expect people to be perfect immediately. It is a work in progress, and it is about learning, and it's about, essentially, it's having a go. We don't expect you to just go straight in, but have a go, start, have a little go. Think about it. What am I being asked? Have I managed to explain that? Do I think I have? OK, I didn't have lots of time, so I couldn't explain everything. That's absolutely fine to begin with. Obviously, going on, if you want to aim for the really high marks, then you need to be working at it and developing and spending a bit of proactive time working through some of the resources about how to do essays. But to begin with, it's about having a go, really it is.
How much time out of the whole proportion of task time for writing an assignment would you say is the writing bit? Like, students often have maybe 8-16 hours, depending on what level module they're doing, to work on their assignment week. What percentage is actually writing?
The actual writing bit is actually a lot less than you would think, because once you've got all the ideas in place, you can know about it. Think about the idea of the cake. You look at the recipe, you find a recipe, you get the ingredients, then you actually make it. How long does it actually take you to make that cake? Not actually that long. So if you think about the making the cake bit as the same as the writing bit, it's getting everything in place, getting yourself sorted, not procrastinating, not as my friend said to me this morning, I'm supposed to be doing something, I'm going to go and clean the windows. No, come back and do the things you're supposed to be doing. Actually, think about it. The more you plan, we're not expecting you to plan to the nth degree, but the more you've got an idea about what you need to do, it helps. So you learn with time, because you get used to planning, and you get used to, and then in time you'll look at the thing and go, I know what that means because I've done that kind of thing before, or I get used to it. So I can't give you an exact number of hours out of it, but the actual writing bit is not an awful long time if you've got everything in place. If you haven't, if you just start writing, what happens is you write all sorts of stuff, and then you find more, and you write more, and then you come to it, and it's all a higgledy-piggledy bit, and it's a lot of series of stream of consciousness essays. I do read some of those, and it's a bit of a case of, well, actually, I can tell you didn't really plan that. Yeah. So it does help. I know I have students go, why should I plan? Yeah. I haven't got time to plan. Yeah. Because in time, that does actually save time in the long run. You'll
get a much better mark on the whole with something that's less well explained and more tightly planned, won't you, than something that's long.
Because you're actually covering everything you need to cover. And I can look at the plan and go, well, actually, I can see that you didn't think about those things because they're not mentioned in your plan. So that kind of helps me to get an idea about why things go wrong or why they go right.
Yeah. Brilliant. We're out of time, but luckily we've got our essay writing workshop. So we'll fill everyone in on that. And I know there's been a bit of confusion about the times online. They'll be indicated on the Student Hub Live website. So if there are any inaccuracies, we will sort all of those out. And you can always email us if you are worried about that, and we'll email you back to let you know when they're on. That's studenthub@open.ac.uk. Before we go, though, Lee and Zach, how's everyone at home?
Everyone seems, still, a little bit, anxious about TMAs, and of course they will be. But I think, a lot of students have said how they're sort of getting to grips with the idea of TMAs, knowing where to find them, looking at the learning outcomes. Still, again, people mentioning mind mapping, that seems to be really popular. So yeah, everyone seems to be fired up and hopefully beginning to get a little bit ready for their first TMA.
We've just had a discussion about kind of discussing TMAs and how open. So in USA and in the forums, it is said that they're not supposed to kind of discuss the actual TMAs. But that I think I should just clarify that doesn't mean that you can't discuss the ideas when planning essays with your peers and your tutor. Although you might not be able to actually discuss your answers to avoid plagiarism, you can discuss the ideas and topics and techniques in your tutor group forums as well.
Absolutely. And we're hoping that that's going to be the crux of the essay writing workshops. OK, let's see how everyone's feeling right now. So we asked how you were feeling, and this is what you all had to say. Happy is the biggest word here, which is brilliant. Confident, ready, nervous, motivated, tired, prepared, hungry. Yes, it is lunchtime, isn't it? Less anxious, much clearer, enthused. Is 24 hours enough? Enlightened, somewhat relaxed, ready to tackle the questions, eager to start. Those are wonderful. Thank you very much. It sounds like you're all ready to begin your TMAs. We're going to show you a short video after this about our writing workshops, so you can see what those are all about, and they will be publicised on the Student Hub Live website, so make sure you check them out. Anyone is welcome, and even if you don't have an essay to write and you're interested in writing essays, you can come along as well and help other people, because sounding out ideas can be really, really useful to both the person who needs the ideas, and also it can help you develop your own learning styles as well. And if you do have an idea about how we at the Student Hub Live can help you or support you, then do email us, studenthub@open.ac.uk, and we also have a little feedback button on the website where you can tell us what you think. There's also a subscribe button, and you can stay tuned with us on YouTube. We're going to have a short break for an hour. If you really like the Student Hub Live and you're interested in postgraduate study, this afternoon we have a session that's all about postgraduates. So that's going to be from 1 until 5 o'clock. You're very, very welcome if you would like to stay tuned for that. We're going to play some replay video now, but keep chatting to each other if you'd like to. After our video with Isabella and I talking about our workshops, then there's going to be a session on submitting your TMA, and then we're going to talk about being a reflective online learner, which is a brilliant session that we did with Simon a couple of weeks ago. And then we'll be back this afternoon for more postgraduate studies, so please do come along if you would like to. But from all of us here at the Student Hub Live, thank you very much for watching, and that's all we've got time for today. We hope to see you at another event, though, very, very soon. Good luck with your studies and enjoy.